Talking Ball State, Don Shondell and Ray McCallum talking Ball State. Nate Davis and Bonzi Wells, Schumann, Bell Tower, and Worthen. Fans all over from Muncie to Berlin. Getting Concannons, Carters, and Greeks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the big guests just keep on coming here at Ball State of the Union. As you'll see right here, we have an all-time great for Ball State football, one, the only, Mr. Willie Snead. Willie, thank you so much for taking some time about your busy schedule to join us here at Ball State of the Union.
No problem, guys. Big fan of the page, man. Great work you guys do, repping Ball State the right way.
All right, thank you. And, Willie, before we get into the questions, I just want to say thank you for your time at Ball State. Me and you were actually there. I was a freshman in 2011 as well. You did leave a year before I graduated. You had a couple of bigger and better things to get onto. I was still hanging out at the Chug, but you got on to some bigger and better things. But you provided some awesome moments, and we're going to get into all those here. But I want to say thank you. You are a big reason for my love for Ball State football. You and Keith Winning and Jawan Edwards, all those guys. So thank you.
That's awesome, man. No problem, bro. Those are
Yeah.
the glory days right there.
Glory days, that's right. Now, before we jump into the glory days, something that kind of caught me off guard here recently, Willie. You had a tryout with the LA Chargers last week. That was pretty sweet. How did that come about, and how do you think that it went?
I think it went really well. Try to stay under the radar with that, but it was a really good deal. I know Joe Ortiz, the GM, really well, and he called me about a month ago and was just asking how I was feeling, if I was still trying to play ball. And I told him definitely. I've been out of the football for a year because I broke my ribs last training camp in Miami. So this was kind of like the first time getting back into football since the injury, and just really feeling my way back into the game, just playing, and it was really good. It was a good turnout. They loved the way I looked. They loved that I was in shape. It was just for me. It was just trying to get back into football shape. You know, it had been 9 months and not really going through a whole season. You know, that was new. So it was just really trying to get my feet wet during their mini camp and just really getting reintroduced to the scheme that Greg Roman has that I ran at Baltimore. So it was really good. It was a good time. Got out to LA with all the craziness out there. You know, it was nice to just play football and be a part of their building and their atmosphere. And you know, I think there could be something there in the future, really soon.
Oh, there we go. I love hearing that.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
So
So
it'll be
hey,
nice.
so yeah, everyone stay tuned for that. Hopefully we'll be able to see Willie back out in the NFL here this upcoming season. But so Willie, let's kind of go back now. Let's go back even before you get to Muncie. You had kind of an interesting high school career from everything that we've seen here. So you split time in Florida and in Michigan. So my first question with that is, those are two great high school football states. What were the kind of the differences in playing a couple years or a year in Florida, a couple years in Michigan, even a couple different schools in Michigan? Kind of all the transition in there. Kind of how was that football wise for you?
It was good. It was definitely different. You know, in the time Florida was known for, I mean, it still is today, to having the best football players come out of the state. And I think that was one of the biggest differences, was going from Florida, where it was mostly football, to Michigan, where at that time they were known as a basketball state.
Okay.
So that was the biggest thing, like recruiting wise, because I wanted to be a Florida Gator at the time. You know, no, like dirt on Ball State or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. My dad was a Florida Gator, so you know that was always a dream of mine. You know, just trying to be a Gator or going to an SEC school in general. And the biggest thing, like a recruiter told me, like from Alabama, was that you know, when they're doing recruiting, like they look at the state they're in, and I think at the time he had said Michigan wasn't like a big state for them, even though one of their best players, and Mark Ingram, was from Michigan. You know, he was out there, and I just think, you know, that was the biggest thing, was just how the state was viewed during that time. That it was a basketball state, so it's like they don't have any good football players up there, you know. But like my argument was, it's like I'm from Florida though. Like my
Yeah,
dad
true.
was a high school coach. Like, you know, the only reason we're up here is because you know, he got offered a job that he couldn't turn down. So um, I mean, I think that was the biggest thing. But you know, playing Michigan ball, you know, it really taught me like the different element of the game, like just the ground and pound. You know, it's like the dirty football, the wing tee, the tight tee. It was like before we got there, it's like we weren't seeing much of that in Florida. It was like spread, it was like I formation, it was like, you know, different brand of football. So I think that was the biggest thing, just from Florida to Michigan, was just the brand of football and how it was viewed.
Okay. And then off the football field, what three high schools, two different states. How is
Yeah,
that personally for you? As a young man trying to kind of get your footing, even just socially at school. Like
yeah.
that seems like a lot going on. I know you said your dad took that job up in Michigan. We'll kind of get into that here in a second. But just personally, not football wise, how was that transition or transitions for you?
It was a little rough at times. I mean, to be honest, like I was always big into sports, so I always met my friends through sports. Getting to know the teammates. In that sense, and then once everybody knew I was a decent football player, that's where I started to be able to relate to kids and be able to create friendships that way. Um, down in Florida, I'm from there, so it just felt like home to me. And then you know I even transferred like my ninth grade year because my ninth grade year I was in Florida. I was at Glade Central, which is like a predominantly like black school. They're known for putting talent in the NFL, right? And then
Mhm.
before we moved to Michigan, my dad wasn't at Glade Central anymore, so they got me out of Glade Central, and I was at Royal Palm Beach High for like a semester, like 6 months, 4 months at the time, and they were planning on me being there, a part of Royal Palm Beach going in my 10th grade year. And they had no idea I was moving to Florida. And like, it was so easy for me to just like stay there. It was like, damn, like I'm really going to Michigan. I'm about to leave. Like it was tough on me at first because like I had all my friends there, it's like I wanted to be recruited from down there. It just made sense. But when we went up to Michigan, the opportunity took was a Christian school called Holland Christian, and they were predominantly white.
Mhm.
It was completely like just total different, like just from black school to white school at the time. And it was just like for me, it was like, these people are so nice. It's like they're so giving. It's like whoa, like it was like a really a culture shock. And we did really well that year. The kids that we grouped with were hardworking kids, like blue collar, like they just loved football. And when my dad introduced the scheme and just his level of play and his scheme and everything like that, like they just fell in love with it and they invested and they were all in. And that year we ended up going 15-0 and won state championship. And that was an awesome year. I played receiver that year, and when my dad said we're going up the road to Muskegon Heights, that was a predominantly black school. So I did three changes within like 2 years. And, the transfer to Muskegon Heights was interesting too, because, that would be the first year I played full time quarterback. And the year before, we had like his name was AJ Westendorp. He was a quarterback. He went to Central Michigan, played tight end there, but he was like the Tim Tebow of Michigan. So
Okay.
like my job was easy. I was backing him up, but I really wanted to play receiver. So I was like, in love with being at Holland Christian. And I didn't want to leave because we had a really good team. We were about to be, we possibly could have been back to back state championships. But we went up to Muskegon, and I ended up playing quarterback for 2 years there. Went all the way to the semifinals my junior year. I twisted my ankle, and that kind of made the difference in the game. And we ended up losing. And then my senior year, I finished out. I think we went 6-6 or something. It wasn't the best year because we played a lot of freshmen that year, and I was basically carrying the team. And we played a lot of good teams that year because what we did the year before, we played a lot of like nationally ranked teams. Like Joliet Catholic came over from Chicago and played us, and we just had a tougher schedule. So just like every school was different, it brought different challenges. But I think
Mhm.
it was just like the culture shock from Florida to Michigan was just like wow. Like besides the weather, these people were really nice. It was a smooth transition, but if I had a choice in the whole thing, I probably would have stayed in Florida, just because of weather and my friends and everything where I grew up. But it definitely prepared me for just being here now in the NFL, being able to go from team to team and having to meet new people, just being able to find common ground, to be able to talk to others and be able to create conversation and relationships. It's like I feel like all those years prepared me for what I'm experiencing now. Because you got to think like every team is different, every culture, they all have their differences. So if you can't adapt to where you work, sometimes you're the odd man out. And I've been able
Mhm.
to adapt really well because of how I grew up and where we moved all over the place.
Yeah, I you
That's
say that's actually a very good point. Especially, we'll get into your stuff, your NFL career a little bit. But at the beginning, there's a lot of jumping around, and that's a very good point. Like you said, you're gonna have to be able to immerse yourself in really at the drop of a hat. You could be, like you were in Cleveland one day, next day you're in Carolina. Boom, you got a whole new building, whole new set of people. I worked in the NFL in the support staff for a while, so we saw guys come and go nonstop. And yeah, the guys who obviously play on the field is always going to be the main thing, but
yeah.
sometimes it's your attitude and how you're able to adapt that can kind of be, that last piece. And so that's a great point. Yeah, from an early age, you were kind of able to get exposed to that and learn. So that's a good, interesting thing to take away from all that. I know Colin was interested in some of the stuff, maybe what you learned in high school, coming working with your dad, and he's a high school coach now as well. So I know he had a couple questions about that type of coaching in high school for you here.
Yeah, definitely. Willie, so as someone that's currently trying to coach wide receivers at the high school level in Indiana, I'm curious what you would recommend. What's the first thing that I need to teach the wide receivers? Is it route running? They know the route tree, but is it, route running? Is it hands? And then what, maybe like even what drill like would you recommend? Because right now I just have them running a certain route and then you hit them when they come out, or just making sure they come out their breaks right. So I'm just kind of curious like what you would recommend, and then maybe what you wish you knew as a younger wide receiver.
Yeah, I think like the biggest thing, like I had an opportunity to coach college receivers in one of these bowl games, these senior bowls in the beginning of the year. And one thing I always harped on, or what was harped on me, was just coming off the football, like stance and starts. Day one is just putting in the DB's mind is I'm gonna run by you every single play, right? Because some kids, if they're running a go, you can tell they're running a go because they're coming off the ball full speed, all that. And like if a kid is running a hitch or a slant or a curl route, they tend to slow down, right? And that's a key indicator for DBs. So one thing I like to do before every practice is do stance and starts. Coming off the ball, rolling off the front toe, and exploding off the football, right? And that translates onto the field. And I think what you're talking about is more technical stuff like top of the routes, making sure that they're doing 1, 2, 3 at the top, coming back to the quarterback, attacking the football, plucking out the air and getting up the field. Like that's stuff I feel like you should do like after practice, or like if you have like days where you just breaking them up, this day we're going to work top of the routes, this day we're going to work releases, things like that. And I think one thing you always should do every single day is coming off the rock, get their legs going, right? We would do that, and then we would do releases. We would do either a single release or a double up. Just get in their mindset is release. Like I'm gonna get off the rock, because the difference between a receiver playing and not playing is if he can create separation, right? And most of that separation is either at the line or at the top of the route. And I always thought, in the beginning, it's always going to matter, because it's like if they get your hands on you, you're dead in the water. So it's like we always want to emphasize creating separation, getting off the football, right? And that allows you to get open down the field. So I would definitely integrate, if you haven't already, just coming off the ball. That's something that I've always been taught. Is just that part of the game is just being explosive. Even the receivers at Ball State, they asked me that last year when I talked to them before they played Miami last year, and I just told them like, man, like I see y'all stance, like y'all stance tells me y'all not running by nobody, and that's one of the things like an old head veteran would tell me, like Marcus Colston or Ted Gibb Jr. They would tell me like, man, your stance tells you everything. Even a DB coach would tell me like, us DBs, we're looking at your stance. Like if you're in a stance that's like relaxed, like we know you're not finna run by nobody unless on paper it says 4-2 or 4-3. Now you just have to respect the fact that you fast. But I mean, if you're not a fast dude, they might sit on your routes just because you have a lazy stance. So I think a lot of kids don't emphasize that. Coaches don't emphasize that enough. It's just your stance, your start, and being explosive off the football creates separation, and it allows you, as a receiver, to be able to get up on guys and then, do your thing there. But I think that was one of the main things. It's just the stance and starts, the releases, because that was always emphasized for me in the league, because it's like, if I can't separate, I'm not finna play at all.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And just, like other drills, you can't get enough catching the football. I think, like you said, the top of the route drills are good, like curl routes, out routes, things like that. But if you guys are running routes all day, like that timing with the quarterback is essential. So like if you can get quarterbacks, receivers, they can't do that stuff enough. That's why me and Keith were so good. Like we would take the time before practice to talk about it, execute it during practice, and if we missed anything or we didn't get to something during practice, we would hit it after practice. And I think that chemistry is really important if you guys want to have an elite passing game. And that carried from Keith to Drew was like that too. And the only way I get into that locker room on that team in 2015 is the fact that I made it important to me like it was to Drew. I would find Drew at the practice because Drew was always he was a technician. He wanted everything to be perfect. And if we didn't get it after practice, we made sure we got it after practice as many times as we needed to. And I think that built, that callous in me to work hard and to always, like, I'm like that today, like with Taylor Heineke, like in LA, like we missed a route in practice and we didn't get to it after practice. I made sure the next day that I got that rep with him, because for me, it's like in my head, it's like I got to get that rep, because if I don't get that rep, if it comes up again and I miss it, then I'm gonna look to that. But if I get it, I know it's like, all right, the next rep I get, whenever I get it, I'm gonna be ready for it. So that's just like mentally for me,
Mm.
Is so important. It's just those reps. You can't get enough of those reps, coach.
Oh yeah, for sure. All right. So we're in Florida, we're in Michigan. Now we're at Ball State. How did we get here, Willie? How did we end up in Muncie, Indiana?
Well, my dad used to take us on these recruiting trips in high school. It was like probably around this time in the summertime when they have the 1-day camps, the 7-on-7 camps. And I never heard of Ball State before we rolled up to Muncie coming from Michigan. And my dad knew Coach Jason Eck at the time, and Joey Lynch was there too. I think he was the quarterback's coach at the time. He was definitely the recruiting coordinator. I remember that much. And they knew about me, they heard about me, they saw my tape and everything, but they never played me. They never see me like in person. So I think like the big school, I was there for a 1-day camp, and the big school that was there was Glenville. I guess they came on the charter bus. They came deep, 42 deep. Like they had all the recruits, right? And I guess it was like a 7-on-7 draw, I remember, and I had their number one corner on me on their chart, on Ball State's chart, and he was guarding me. I ended up running a go route. It was one of those plays where he threw it up. It was in the back corner, left the end zone, kind of like my South Florida catch, but it was like on the other end, on the scoreboard side. And I just remember going over top of the kid, and everybody was watching. And like from that day on, like Ball State offered me after that camp. They took me on the tour. I came to one of the games when they played Western Michigan at the time, when God rest his soul, Stan Parrish was the head coach at the time. And I just remember going to the game, and they just looked rough, man. Like Western Michigan was getting after him. I'm like, man, but they got Keith. Keith was a freshman at the time. I'm like, look at this kid. Like, he looks legit. He's only a freshman. So at the time, I could see myself in the cardinal and white. Like, I could see myself doing something here, especially if like the top colleges are like just being like, look at the state you're in. You're not good enough. Like, okay, I'm gonna go to Ball State. I'm gonna ball out. I'm gonna do what I need to do and do what I want to do, which was eventually get to the league. So, that was kind of like, the backstory of Ball State. It was a school I'd never heard about. When I got here, though, I fell in love with it fast. I was a kid that never got out the house, so I didn't know what was out there. So when I saw Ball State, I was like, dang, this got to be the best university ever. Compared to Western Michigan, like they don't have nothing on us. So that was an awesome moment, and I committed. And I'll tell you this story. I had decommitted from Ball State because Stan Parrish got fired, and I was going to Western Michigan at the time. Sorry about that. And Pete Lembo had got the job, and he called me. I guess he tells me to this day, I was the first call he made to the recruits. And he said, Willie, I'm a new coach here. I'm bringing a system here that you're going to love. It's the spread. We've had 2,000-yard receivers every year. I really just want you to think about coming back. And I remember praying about it. I talked to my parents about it. And the head coach at the time for Western Michigan was kind of like on the hot seat. So he was going into his last year. And I did some research on Lembo. I did research on his on his offense and everything. And I just thought it was a good fit. And I ended up decommitting from Western Michigan, I had to call the coach and have that talk, and that was an unpleasant conversation to say the least. But it was about my future, and at the time, I was already committed to Ball State. I wanted to come to Ball State. It was just a different coach, but then he made me feel good about it. He made me feel good about coming back, and it was one of the best decisions I've made in my career.
I couldn't agree more. It was awesome. The best decision
great.
ever. I don't want to see. I don't even want to think about you, Western Michigan.
It doesn't even make sense anymore, right?
Nah. But okay, so you get to Muncie. Here's a question. We had Drew Plitt on a couple months back, and we asked him the same question. Welcome to college football moment at Ball State. What was it?
Ooh, playing in Oklahoma in front of 100,000 and getting our ass handed to us 60-3.
One of my good friends freshman year, we had some class together, was Juwan Edwards. And I remember him coming back that next week after that game when he got blown up on that screen pass. Yeah. And I think I showed it to every time he looked up in class, I had it play and just show him too. So yeah, I didn't make it to that one. I was hoping to go to that game that year, but
you didn't want to go to that one.
No, that would have been sweet though, just to check it out. But
I'm not gonna lie. The other moment was before that game. It was the Buffalo game when I caught the game winner.
Okay.
It was a slant against Buffalo, and Khalil Mack. To this day, I get on him about it. I saw him last week. I got on him like, bruh, do you remember that game? He's like, yeah, bro, you was talking so much trash to me out there. I'm like, yeah, like everybody was talking about you like you was just this big shot. You was like this big Terminator dude out there. I'm like, nah, man, I'm about to show him what's up. Because I guess he made some joke. He was like, there was like 3 or 4 guys asking for his autograph at that game, and they were on our team. I'm like,
oh, geez.
I'm like, dude, that was not the truth. I don't know how true that was, but yeah, that was an awesome moment too. Just catching the game winner as a freshman. It was like one of those tight games. It was obviously a big win for Coach Lembo coming out, just being coach. And then the next week we played Army, and I had over 100 that game. So, but I don't like talking about those. Like, I feel like the real game was that Oklahoma game. Like, it was just, seeing the fans and just being in a stadium that loud. I was like, wow, like this is college football. You know what I'm saying? It's just like
for sure.
One of those feelings like you can't like, you got to be there to be a part of. You can't like make that stuff up, right? It's just like the tradition there. It was just, it was really cool to be about. Besides the butt whooping we took, like, that experience right there just really like, it really showed me what college football is really about.
So you're talking about big wins for Pete Lembo.
Mm-hmm.
Huge one right out of the gate, which I wanted to ask you about next. Your first game in college, my first game in college as well, even though I was in the stands. I got the program and the ticket right there. That first game at Indiana, Lucas Oil Stadium. Tell me about that, because that's my if people ask me what's my favorite game in Ball State history, that's always number one. I know there's some bigger wins out there, but that's my favorite one. Kind of just walk me through that game real quick.
That was a great game, man. To be honest, I didn't play much that game because I had dislocated my shoulder like 2 weeks before in practice. So they were kind of like, they were iffy if I was even going to suit up for that game, but they ended up letting me. But yeah, that was a great game, man, because one, it's an in-state rival, and the history with that goes way back. So there was a lot of hype going up it, with it, and obviously it was at Lucas Oil Stadium, so there was like a big stage to be on, and I think just the whole locker room, the whole like staff and everybody, we just prepared like since I got there in January, because I was an early enrollee, we had BIU everywhere. That was the game that, coming out the gate, we just wanted to set the tone. And, it was just a great win for the program. And, at the end of the day, it got us rolling. It got the Pete Lembo era really hyped for fans, wise and stuff. But, that was obviously a great game just to be a part of and to watch. And when it came down to the wire like that, it just got to enjoy and just, enjoy being a part of it at the moment.
I mean, even though it was technically a Ball State home game, there was tons of Indiana fans there all day downtown. I was hearing this, hearing that from chirping IU fans. And then I was hitting them with the loot, losers chant after the game. It was perfect. So thank you for that, for you and all the boys from that. Now, not only that game, but your guys' tenure, across those 3 years you were there, big wins all around.
Mhm.
3 winning seasons, 2 bowl games. It should have been 3 bowl games. I always remind people that your freshman year or my freshman year, we were 6-6, didn't make it. There was only 2 teams who were bowl eligible. It's like, why don't you just have us in Western Kentucky play each other? But that's a topic for another day. But
Right.
so multiple wins against Indiana. The next year in Bloomington, just as big, if not bigger.
Yes.
When you had that catch to set up Stephen Schaub's field goal, I somehow ended up 20 rows down from where I was at because all the Indiana fans had left because we were blowing them out, and we kind of let them
Mhm.
back in a little bit. You referenced it earlier, the South Florida catch with Eric Patterson's interception kind of locking them down.
Yeah.
Game at Virginia. How are you guys able to get this type of success at Ball State, which we hadn't seen really before
Yeah.
or after? And why hasn't Ball State been able to replicate that, do you think?
I mean, it's so hard to, really put into words. I think just speaking from my experience, I think a lot of those games were won in the off season. With the winter program, I mean, David Feely was one of a kind
Mm-hmm.
strength coach. And I think the class that I was in that was like Horatio Banks, Eric Patterson, Juwan Edwards, Nick Miles, a lot of guys that we trusted. And we went through the mud, together. Like we grinded in the summer. Like I just think like those games are won in the off season. When you're putting in the work and when nobody's watching, you're building that callus. You're building up towards something. And I think, for us, we just wanted to be, we just wanted to be remembered. And what does that take? That takes a lot of grit. That takes a lot of hard work. That takes a lot of sacrifice. And I just think we had a lot of guys that were willing to sacrifice for each other. And there was no like, I mean, obviously guys have individual goals. I had my own. But we all pushed each other to be great. Like we challenged each other at practice. Like me and Eric Patterson would come to blows sometimes because that's how great we wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just prepared us for whoever we played. They was going to get our best shot. And I think when practices were going on, it was offense versus defense. Like we wanted to win the day. What were you going to do? What was it going to take to win the day? And if you lost the day, were you going to come back tomorrow with the same mentality, or were you going to take it up a notch? And we just challenged each other all 3 of those years, at least the years I was there. And I just think the guys that were around us, the callus that we built together. And when we went on the game day, man, we just let it loose. Like we were there for each other, we supported each other, we loved each other. And even in the biggest moments when we lost, like even when we lost, I can't, like when we lost to Clemson, like that was a huge game. And like besides the heat, like just the atmosphere, like the players that they had over there, Sammy Watkins, DeAndre Hopkins, Taj Boyd, we got NFL talent on the other side, and we're just still like trying to go after these cats, and
Mm-hmm.
that's, I mean, a lot of guys walk into the stadium with that losing mindset, and it's just like we work too damn hard to get here to just roll over because this team is like, ranked in the top 25.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a mentality at the end of the day. I just think, I'm not in the locker rooms in the past. I just know that the mentality is everything. If you believe and you put in the work, like we put in the work, so we believed that we could play with anybody. But if you don't put in the work, if you don't prepare the right way, you can't expect to win those games, right? Even though you think, you have a chance, it's like mentally you got to be all the way up there, and you got to have a group of men that think the same way. It can't just be 2 or 3 individuals and then everybody else is like, we're not a big enough school to beat these cats. Like, no, you are. You just got to have the right men that think that way and are willing to put in the work and not afraid to lose. At the end of the day, like you're going to lose a rep, but are you going to lose all those reps? You got a bunch of reps coming down the pipe. Like, are you going to lose every single, but you're going to lose a couple, but the ones you win matter more, and I just think we had, like I said, we had a whole bunch of guys with that mentality. And I think that makes the biggest difference. It's just when you have a collective group of guys with the same mentality, putting in the same work with you, it's like the sky is the limit half the time. And, when Keith Winning's class left, and, I had a big decision, it's just like for me, I had put in all the work that I wanted to. I put goals on paper, and if I hit all these goals, I was going to go to NFL, and I hit all those goals, and I was just like, man, it's time to go. And I think, I mean, if I stayed my senior year, I really think we do well because it's just like, obviously I was one of the better players on that team, but it's just like the mentality, it's like the
Hmm.
mentality of just like getting the most out of my guys, my brothers. I loved everybody on that team, and it was so hard for me to leave. But for me, it was just like more of a personal decision. But I think in the time, it was just the guys, man. It was the guys in the locker room. We loved each other. We was willing to go to war for each other. We was laying on the line for each other. And I think at the end of the day, the teams that do really well, they're built off of that. You can look down the list, of teams, and you could just be like, I bet they got a strong brotherhood in there, because it's just like, that speaks volumes more than, just a whole bunch of individuals trying to, accomplish their own goals. You know what I mean?
Hmm. For sure. I got one more Ball State question for you, and then I'm going to let Colin kind of dive into the NFL career a little bit. So you're talking about the brotherhood and everyone from that 2015 team that you were not on. Had you been on that team, you would have been with me. I actually ended up being the student manager with Coach Gaither for the wide receivers in 2015. That was
Hey.
my senior year. I wanted to ask you one final question about Ball State, about my old boss, Tex Ritter. You got any good stories, or your old equipment manager, Tex? We've
You
had
talking
some
about the
interest.
equipment? You talking about the
Yeah,
equipment guy?
Tex. We've had some interesting stories about Tex over the years. You got any interesting ones?
Yeah, Tex was no bend, no break, man. He was not giving up nothing. I just remember being there, and I just remember when I first got there, the guys telling me about uh, one shoe text, and I'm like, what does that even mean? And they're just like, dude, like he's only gonna give you one pair of everything, and if you lose something, you're SOL.
Yep.
SOL. And it's just like I met him for the first time, and I was there for 3 years. I try to soften him up with my charisma and my personality. I just try to love on him in different ways. And he would bend for me a little bit. He'll let me go to the back and wander around. But if I ever wanted another pair of gloves, I can't help you, Willie. I
No.
can't do nothing. And I'm looking back and I'm like, dude, you got all these boxes of gloves. Like, what are you doing? You trying them all on? Like, give them away, bro. Like, let it go. Like, I don't know. Tex was a funny cat, man, but he was always cool to be around. I think he lightened up over the years, but I don't know. Like you had him after me, so was he still like a hard ass, or was
Yeah,
he?
but that ended up the next year ended up being his last year. It's when he retired after that season. So yeah, but no, he was still the same way. I mean, he was always great. But yeah, if you needed an extra pair, your whole foot could be coming out of a sock, and he'd say, "Well, I don't see anything wrong with that.
You
You're
have a
fine." Get
whole hole in the
yeah,
top of the shoe. It's like, what's wrong with it? Can you still put it on? Where are the laces at? Like, oh god,
so you probably got a little bit of a jump from what you were given from Texas at Ball State to once you made it to the NFL. So I know Colin
Mm.
has a handful of questions about your time in the NFL. So Colin, go ahead and start peppering Willie here with some stuff you want to know about his time in the NFL.
Definitely. So, Willie, 2014, you end up going undrafted. What was that process like? Were there any teams that reached out to you during the draft process that seemed interested? And then afterwards, what was it like to finally land a team and find a home, particularly with the Saints too, as well?
Yeah, it was tough, Colin. I'm not gonna lie. For me, I left as a junior, so I took a big risk. And
Mhm.
just coming from the MAC, it was, from what scouts said, they thought I should have stayed another year. And when I got cut by Cleveland, at the time, I really thought I was going to make the team because Mike McDaniel was my receiver coach, who's the current Miami coach. And Kyle Shanahan was the OC at the time, and he had came to work me out with Keith during the whole draft process. And he was the only guy. He was the only guy that came to work me out. So I already knew them really well, and from the conversations I had with Kyle during that time, he made sure and reassured me that if I do well and I finish the training camp healthy, that I was going to be there. So when I got cut, um, I was all the way in Muncie, ironically, and they called me and said that you need to turn in your playbook. This is going to happen, and I'm all the way in Muncie. So I had to drive 4 hours back to
Oh,
Cleveland the day of the game. Like literally, I can't make this up. I'm there on game day on Saturday. The guys are in the student hall doing their whole pregame routine, eating before they go to the stadium. I get the call like right there in the student hall, and they tell me that I need to turn in my playbook. And I told them, I'm here in Muncie. Like, I'm not there. He's like, well, you need to drive back because we need the playbook and we need to do an exit interview. I'm like, wow. So I literally leave the game, and I drive all the way back to Muncie. And that was probably the hardest 4 hours ever of my life. I cried. And even when I got back to my hotel room, they didn't call me back to be back on the practice squad. So I was really just new to all this stuff. And, I just felt like I had like blew it in some cases. And, to be honest, the New York Giants called like literally right after. And my agent told me that I'm going to fly to New York, work out for them. Tom Coughlin was the head coach at the time. And, I ended up working out. They made me run a 40. I didn't feel good about it. I was just kind of just messed up from that whole process because I never experienced anything like that before. So I didn't know what was going to happen. So they didn't keep me. So I ended up going home and I'm living with my parents for like maybe 2 months before I get a call from Carolina. They picked me up. I'm on the practice squad for maybe like 6 weeks, and then they let me go again, and that was a shock at the same time too because I feel like they were preparing me to play, and I don't know. I still didn't understand at the time how the roster makes up and stuff like that. So I really just was taking it personal at the end of the day, and I just felt like it wasn't meant for me to be, and I made a change in agents. I don't know if that made a difference in the end, but I get a call from New Orleans like right in the beginning of December. It was like 3 weeks left in the season, and I'm contemplating going to play CFL football. Because at the time I left college to play football. All I wanted to do was play ball, and just to give an opportunity to to show what I can do. So I get a call from New Orleans, a tryout, worked out. It went well. They kept me, and those last 3 weeks were just like a tryout for me, just to go into next year. And I did really well. I didn't get called up to games, but I made enough of a footprint in that facility, in that culture, to be like, let's keep this guy around. Let's see what he can do. And yeah, the rest was history, man. But that whole process from Cleveland to get into New Orleans was tough, man, because it's just when you get cut, in this business, it's so hard to catch back on, especially as an undrafted guy. I always like to say this: when you're drafted, you basically got 9 lives. It's
Mhm.
like it's hard for you not to get picked up when you're draft pick unless you just like are bad with the law or you just have a bad rap out there about you. But if I had second round tag on me, I'll probably be picked up right now. You know what I'm saying? I think that undrafted tag, at any point in your career, it hurts because it's like, they can pick this guy who's drafted, or like, those things always factor in when it comes to teams picking you up. So, um, it was tough, but God was in control the whole time, and I just had to trust it. And it worked out. It worked out being
Mhm.
in New Orleans, and it got me going in the right direction.
It's shocking to me too that an offensive guru like Mike McDaniels, head coach of the Dolphins now, would cut you. And then I looked at their roster too. On that year, there was like Andrew Hawkins. Uh, the what's Josh Gordon only had 5 games played. Like they needed
Miles
another wide
Miles
receiver.
Austin, Miles Austin
Yeah,
was there. Nate Burleson, Good Morning America was there.
Mhm.
It's like,
yeah, but they didn't have a 1,000 yard receiver though.
mm-mm,
Like so
mm-mm.
they needed another guy to come off there. So I just saw that kind of shocking when I went through the roster last night. I do have a question though, because another person that was on the roster at that time, Johnny Manziel. Did you ever have any like passing interactions with him? What was he like?
Yeah, Johnny was cool, man. He was a party animal for sure. He liked to have a good time. There was just so much hype about Johnny. I think it was funny. Like we had Monday workouts for rookies, and I remember him pulling up to the facility. Workouts was like at 8. He's pulling up in the parking lot at 7:55. He's getting in the weight room, and we're all there. He's like, dude, I was in Vegas with Gronk. Man, we was having a great and like the next day, it was like later that day. I don't know if y'all remember that viral picture of him being on like the blow up penguin, or the blow up what's that bird called, flamingo.
Oh,
It was
I just
like a
remember
blow,
I just remember the picture of him dressed up as Scooby Doo. That's what I always remember.
it was like a picture of him on a flamingo. He was in the water holding up a champagne bottle, smiling. But
Okay.
like literally, it came out like that afternoon, and we were all cracking up. It was just like, this guy is for real, man. And but no, he was a great dude. He was a great teammate. He was just a party animal at the end of the day. I don't think he couldn't separate the two, man. It was just like, I think when he got to the league, it was just more professional than what he was used to at Texas A&M. But like he was a great dude, and never had a problem with Johnny. He was awesome.
Moving forward to New Orleans, what was Drew Brees like? I've heard he was kind of like a quirky fellow, definitely licked his hands all the time until COVID, then he stopped. But I'm
Yeah.
kind of curious what he was like as well. And how did you establish that chemistry with him? Because there was a year when you were in New Orleans, you were 16 yards away from a 1,000-yard season.
Yep. That was actually my rookie season, 2015. Technically my rookie season.
Mhm.
And yeah, that chemistry was built during training camp. I just remember like I remember like there was 14 receivers on that depth chart. We were deep, and I was number 14. And we ended up keeping four receivers at the end of training camp. And I just remember going into it, my receiver coach, Johnny Morton, at the time told me, he's like, you need to know every position, and I think he told me, it was like, that's going to give you the best chance of playing. So I took that to heart, and I told him I'm learning the X, I'm learning the Z, I'm learning the slot. And I never played the slot before, like, because Jamil Smith was always slot, at Ball State. So I was always the outside receiver. So when I went in the league, I was an outside receiver, but I wasn't the premier height, speed for what, these NFL teams want. They want the 6'2", 4'4", I was 5'11", running 4'5", so it's like I wasn't ideal size for what they wanted, but I knew everything. And the thing was, guys were getting hurt during training camp. Guys would mess up, miss reps, and I was always right there to jump in. So like in the huddles, Drew would see me in the huddle more. He would see me there. He was, I was always in there now. So it's like, okay, now he's starting to throw me passes. Okay, he can catch. Oh, he's at the F now. Oh, he was at the X. He's at the Z. Okay, so it's just like those reps. Like I was talking earlier, like just with your players, those reps matter because now the quarterback knows you. He can trust you. And I'm just always taking the extra effort to talk to Drew. Like, hey, Drew, what are you thinking on this route? Like, versus this coverage, am I supposed to run it this way, or do I need to? So we was always having that type of dialogue day in and day out. And during training camp, it's like 12-hour days of football. So we're getting plenty of time in. And once the season came, I think it was just the more reps I got, is just the more he was able to trust me, just to be at the spot when he expects me to be at the spot, and for a quarterback like him, he's a great guy. He's a family dude, but he's about his business. He's a professional, as any professional is going to be. And, when he's getting in the facility at 6 a.m. in the parking lot at 5:30, and he's not leaving until 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, like, that's how it means something to him. So it always was important to me to put in, if not more work, just as much work as him, just to give myself a chance. And I knew for me, coming in the back door, no red carpet treatment, like, he didn't know me, he didn't have to know me. But the fact is, like, when guys go down, you got to be ready to go. And I was always ready to go. I always made sure I didn't make the same mistake twice. And over time, he was starting to throw me passes, and next thing you know, he wants to do a handshake. So it was just like those moments in practice where I was able to build that chemistry, to build that trust with Drew, where it carried over into the games. And then, we would win games, just, off of just the timing and stuff. And then, coming up 16 yards short of 1,000, that was like, that was something I never thought would happen, because it's just how everything started. And, just with Cleveland and everything, and to get to that moment, like, all I needed was one more slant, and it was one of those games where it was just like, it was more in Sean's control than Drew, just play calling wise. But I didn't really, it would have been awesome to be a 1,000-yard receiver, but like, to me, I was already a 1,000-yard receiver. Like, 16 yards, like, come on, dude. Like, I could have got that weeks ago. So it didn't really matter to me, but it was just awesome to know that, that all that was just off of Drew and trusting me, because I don't think I ever get to that point of Drew. If I don't put in the work, if Drew doesn't trust me, if I don't go the extra mile to make sure that he knows I'm there, that stuff doesn't happen. So, Drew was probably one of the best quarterbacks, the best players I ever been around, because he taught me how to be a professional. He taught me how to, love the game differently, to work hard differently. So it was a blessing in disguise to get cut from Cleveland because I never would have met Drew if I stayed there. So
We'll start a petition to the NFL stats department. We'll just go ahead and round that up for you.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that, man. Dude, that means
2 quick
everything.
questions before we move on from the Saints. Well,
Okay.
the first one's more of a compliment, really. You in a Saints jersey, it's a giving aura. It was a perfect pause, but it was a perfect look for you. It was a nice, thick, clean look.
I appreciate that.
Before we move on though to the Ravens, I gotta ask you about the Keanu Neal hit. What do you remember? What can you tell us about that? Because it was just a clean clock kind of hit, crazy nasty.
I still get teased about that hip to this day. Even when I work out with kids, like when they do end up finding the tape, they're like, "Coach, is this you?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." What I remember is the one-handed catch I made on that route.
Yeah.
So like it would have been a highlight. It would have been a highlight play because I killed him on the route. I killed him. Like I left
You were
him.
moving.
Oh my gosh. Like had open space. I caught the ball like this. Like I'm moving. And I remember now. I should have just went out of bounds. But Kobe Fleener was blocking. He was like blocking toward his guy towards the sideline. So it was like one of those deals where I cut inside. As soon as I make that cut, I turn and I just see helmet and boom. All I remember was the hit. And I was just like, it's like one of those deals where you get your bell rung. Like I wasn't knocked out. Like if you watch the tape, I'm sure you have. Like you'll see like my arms straighten out for a minute or a second, but it was just like that initial shock. Like he hit me, I lit up, and then all of a sudden I just remember seeing the ball and rolling over it, and then Mike T was screaming at me. He's like, "I got the ball, bro! I got the ball. You're good." Like Mike T was such a great teammate at that time, but that's a different conversation. But like that hit was just like. It was just one of those things that's just like, man, like you didn't see it coming. So it like I feel like it would have hurt more if I like braced, but I never braced for it. Like I just cut and then all of a sudden, boom. So it was just I definitely could have kept playing. I'll say that much. I could have played, but I think the fact that like my arms straightened out for a second and they were just like so like conscious about just, concussions and stuff like that. It just looked bad. So they just pulled me. But like I don't got hit like that before. I mean, what do we call it? You're getting your bell rung, right?
Yeah.
It's part of the game, but like it's not like he knocked me out and I was in a stretcher or nothing like that, right? He got a clean shot on me, So it happens, man. It happens to us sometimes.
What does Drew say after that play to you, or did you even see him?
Man, all I remember was seeing the trainers. They wouldn't even let me go back on the
Right.
field to even have a conversation. I was so pissed off because it was like I can keep going. I can keep going. Like I want to keep going. Like I had just made that crazy catch. Like they were just starting to let me go. Like I had caught like an underneath route, like a slant, went for like 30. And then I caught a deep pass, like I think a possession before it went for like another 25. So I was starting to heat up. And then I made that catch, and that was about to be explosive for like 30. And then boom, that happened. So I was like, I really wanted to go back in because I was chasing 100 yards that game. But it's like once they pull you and once they make the decision, there's no going back.
Right.
So it sucked.
Just want to talk a little bit about your time at the Ravens. You were there when Lamar had his MVP season. So I'm curious about that. And then also curious, Drew Brees and Lamar Jackson, both great quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I'm curious what overlaps maybe in their game have, and what are some differences you saw of similar greatness?
Yeah, I think the differences, I'll start with that, was just the ability, the athletic ability. Like Lamar coming in as a rookie, even his second year, his MVP year, he was just not there like when it comes to like going through the progressions. Like first read's not there, second read, third read. He was just more so reliant on his legs. And that's the way the offense was, kind of like built around just his athletic ability. There's a lot of QB driven, RPOs, like not as much drop back, a lot of play action. So it was like it was built for that. And and then Drew on the other side, he was like 5'11", like not the biggest guy, not the strongest guy, but he was precision accurate. He knew exactly where you're going to be. He knew where to get the ball out, where to put it. He just always just saw it happen before it happened, right? Where Lamar was just like, see it, then go. He's not like anticipating much, at that point in his career. Where they're similar at was they're very competitive, man. Like uberly competitive. Like Drew would he'd never like to lose. And like he would go like cornhole, like just like little games like that. He would always challenge himself, like throwing ball in a bucket, whatever. It could be anything. Basketball. He just was uber competitive. And that's how Lamar is too. Lamar, like we would have like these games in the locker room, just like little stuff, competitive, like shooting in the basket, whatever. Just like that competitiveness was like contagious. And that's where I feel like their greatness is very similar. It's just like they're the guy that you want to go into war with. That's how competitive they are. And then I think that's what separates them. Like when it comes to greatness, it's just like, that's why Tom Brady is, essentially the GOAT, because of how competitive he was. He just never liked to lose, and he was going to do whatever he had to make sure they won or was in position to win. So I feel like that's the similarities. It's just how competitive they were. They're ballers at the end of the day. One obviously has a Super Bowl. One is on the verge of winning a Super Bowl. And I just think, I was very blessed to be with both of them, man. But, the way Lamar looks now, just year 7, going into it, I think he's not even at the tip of his game yet, man. I think he just has so much more development and growth. But, Drew was just like a pro's pro. It was just like playing with Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, essentially. Like that guy right there, man. He was just, I would go to war for Drew, man. He was just an awesome guy, awesome football player.
All right,
Willie,
Willie.
same.
Well, hold on, Colin.
Go ahead.
We're gonna go. We're getting a little long here. I don't want to keep Willie all night, so I want to get to our rapid fire questions here. This is a very sacred segment we have here where Colin only asks the hard hitting questions. Rapid fire, Colin. Willie, just give us the first thing that comes to your mind. Colin, hit him with the rapid fires.
Favorite Ball State teammate?
Juwan Edwards.
Logo debate here. Dancing Charlie or the traditional Cardinal head?
The traditional Cardinal.
Least favorite team in the MAC?
Toledo.
Oh.
No.
When was the last time?
I take that back.
It has to be. It's only one answer.
Northern Illinois.
Thank you.
Okay, same.
Sorry about that.
But Toledo, I don't
like
them either.
Yeah, same. When was the last time you were in Muncie?
Shit. That's a great question.
Hard-hitting journalism right here.
It's been that long, dude. I want to say before COVID. Wow. It's been that long, dude. I can't even give it a year, but I know it was before COVID.
Okay. Favorite bar and or restaurant in Muncie?
It used to be Dill Street. That's where I met my wife. I met her at Dill Street.
Funny enough, I met my wife at the Chug.
There you go.
You can find love in the village. Some underground, some above ground.
I liked the Sunshine Cafe though.
Oh yeah, that's a great one. What happened to the old Twitter account?
Ooh, I got rid of it.
You have you have a Hall of Fame Twitter name though, by the way.
What is that?
Your Twitter handle.
Willie Snead.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my old Twitter had too much negativity towards it. I don't know. I feel like after the Tua comment last year, it was very subtle, but people took it to heart. I had said something about he was soft after one of the playoff games, and people took that to heart. And then I think when I left San Francisco, I had said something, and people took it the wrong way. They were saying like I was jealous of the receivers and stuff. I'm like, dude, like I literally said that I wished I was on the 53 because I would have made a difference. But like,
right.
You know how people are, man. They take one word and they pull it apart and brew something else up. But I had got rid of the old Twitter. I kind of went like I kind of like got rid of Twitter altogether, and I had just made that account you're talking about, like literally a couple
Mm.
months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the crazy thing about Twitter is you're right, haters are gonna hate, but people will say stuff to you on there that they wouldn't say if they saw you.
Oh
You know,
no,
so it's
no,
not real life.
it's not. Yeah,
One of when are we gonna see a Willie Snead the fifth?
you want to see him now?
You
Oh,
have a there's a Willie Snead the fifth.
There is,
oh,
yes. He was
Okay, okay.
he was born in he was born on Valentine's Day this past year.
oh, awesome.
Well,
Yeah,
congratulations.
Yeah.
thank you.
And then
Yeah,
last one for the rapid fire. How much does Willie Snead have left in the tank at age 32? Because some people were asking about it on Twitter. Like I said, they're doubting you, Willie.
man, I got as much tank. I got as much left in the tank as they'll give me an opportunity. Like realistically, realistically, I would like to play like 2 or 3 more years. Like I want to get to 35 and see how I feel. You know what I'm
I want
saying?
to see you on like the Rams, like with a gunslinger like Matthew Stafford and two other wide receivers. So they, they'll forget about you. Then you break one off crazy. Like I want to see you with like an established 30-something-year-old quarterback like Drew Brees, where you can
Mhm.
just go nuts. You know,
I was starting to get with Justin Herbert, like he has a crazy arm. Like he is deadly accurate. And just a couple of days I was there, I was creating connection with him. It was just he's an awesome guy to play with too. But the funny thing is, man, and I'll just say this, like my last year, full-time year was of just like playing like more than like 5 snaps, like was 2020. And my yards, I think I had over 450. I had 4 or 5 touchdowns, and I had got COVID for 2 games, so I missed 2 games. Actually, 3 games because I had messed up my ankle at the end of the year, so I missed the last game. But like with those numbers now, if I had got those numbers now, I'd probably be making at least like 10 million.
right?
So like that was my last bad year. That wasn't even a bad year. It was just like that was my last year playing 2020, and then 2021 I was in between the Raiders and the Carolina. The Raiders sold me on a dream. I didn't even play. I wasn't playing more than 5 snaps a game. I was playing 60 snaps a game in Baltimore, go to 5 snaps in Vegas. So I wasn't there. Then the year after that, I was in, you know, San Fran for 2 years on the practice squad on and off. And their system is, you know how it is. It's like two receivers, a tight end, fullback. Like it's not ideal for, receivers unless you're actually playing. And they were established. Like we had a really good team that year. Like Juwan Edwards, Debo, Ayuk, Ray, like we had guys. So it's like they had their guys, and then this past year I broke my ribs, so I didn't get to play. So like I feel like if this year, and I always like to say this is the year for me. I feel like if I can catch on with the team and make the 53 or just even be on the practice squad and come up for a few games, like all I need is an opportunity to show these scouts and these coaches that I can still play at a high level, even at my age. Because I look at all the guys that I look up to, like Kobe Bryant, like LeBron, like guys that have played in their 30s, like they're in their prime. I'm in my prime right now.
Mhm.
I
Right.
take care of my body really well. I have a great team. Besides the rib injury, like that was the biggest injury I've ever had. So I've been very blessed and fortunate to not have, amount of injuries stack up. But, like I haven't put anything bad on tape. I haven't had a down year. I just haven't had very rarely any opportunities to play. So I think this year is just about the year of, really getting on a team that can see the value in me still and allowing me to go out there and play. No politics, none of that stuff. Just letting the guy go out there, compete, and let the chips fall where they may. I can live with getting beat out, if it came down to it, but I can't live with the fact that, guys are just getting put ahead of me because they were drafted or they paid them a lot of money. It's like, dude, like if I get beat out, okay, but if I'm in the hunt, if I'm in the running and I'm putting myself in position, like let's not play politics. I want to win the championship. I want to win a Super Bowl before I
Mm-hmm.
retire. And I got to taste that with the Niners a few years ago, and it's just like I want this again, but I want to win it this time, and I actually want to be suited up for it. So, that's kind of the motivation right now for me is just getting to a Super Bowl and winning it, and then I can, I feel like I can walk away at peace. But it's hard for me to walk away right now knowing that my last year of actually playing was a solid year in a lot of guys' eyes. So,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to be able to land somewhere where I can actually like, be a contributor again, whether that's special teams or whatever, or playing offense. But, I don't know if I can be able to walk away from the game, knowing that, the only reason I'm not playing is because I'm lack of opportunity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I
So,
got you.
We're rooting
Well,
for you, Willie.
say you got between the two of us, especially Colin, Colin is the number one advocate you could ever have. So he's got your back here.
I appreciate that,
100%.
Colin.
Stand behind me, Willie. I'll take the
That's
Twitter
right. We
Twitter
got you,
trolls
buddy.
on.
All
I
right, hey,
appreciate that,
Willie,
gang.
this has been awesome. I know we've gone a little bit longer than we originally anticipated, but I do want to ask one more question for you.
Shoot.
Some big news came out recently. I would say you're going to be the headliner of the 2025 Ball State Hall of Fame class. What did that feel like when you heard that, and what does it mean to be going into the Ball State Hall of Fame class? You know, pretty early on, I would say. You know, some people have to wait a long time. I made a video last year talking about who would be the next Hall of Fame classes, and I had put you as like an honorable mention, not because you didn't deserve to get in, but I assumed they were waiting until you were either done or they thought you were done playing in the NFL. That's kind of why I thought you hadn't been in yet.
Right.
So just kind of what does it mean to you overall that you're getting this great honor?
Yeah, it's a blessing, man. All glory to God. And I just really give credit to all my coaches and teammates that I was with, during that time. And Pete Lembo was, a huge advocate for me at the time, and he's the one that actually called me and told me the news. I thought he was calling me to give me a job or something. So I was like really surprised. I'm like, why is Pete calling me? I haven't talked to Pete in years. And when he told me the news, I was just in awe. And I just really thought about those days when I was there, just those 5 a.m. workouts, just everything that it took to even just be considered, in the Hall of Fame. It's just such a blessing. And I think about all the guys that I met, all the games that we won. It really was a dream come true. And just, I was able to tell my kids that, and, my wife, we met up there and she got to see me play at Ball State. But, it's just in the moment, like when I'm there at Ball State, you never think about that stuff, right? You never think, oh, hey, I want to be in the Ball State Hall of Fame, or something like that. I mean, you just work because you love it, and, you just want to do great things while you're there. And, I was able to do that for myself, and we won a lot of games. We won a lot of big games. And I think those memories, just with the guys that I did it with, man, it was just, those are some of the best memories of my life. And so for Ball State, to honor me with that, it's just gravy on top, man. It's just like, man, like, this is so cool. And, I just, like I said, I always think about to my teammates, to my coaches that just even put me in position, just trusted me to be in those positions, to just make those plays and to even put myself in this consideration. Cause I just think about the Dante Loves of the world, the Blaine Bishops, I think about Nate Davis, like those guys that like paved the way, Mike New, those guys that won championships. It's just like, those are the guys I was looking at walking through those hallways at Ball State. It's like, man, these guys were awesome. So to be considered to be in that category now, it's just a blessing, man. And I can't say it enough that God is good. And, without him, without Jesus in my life as my savior, like Willie Snead's probably not even around playing football. I'll put it that way. That's how much of an impact he's made in my life. And, he's still doing it now. That's why I'm, 11, 12 years in the league now. Like, from a guy that was no star recruit, undrafted, like this is not supposed to happen to a guy like me. So I give all glory to God, and I give recognition to all the guys that I played with, the coaches that were able to put me in position just to be able to live my dream and to put that Willie Snead stamp on his Ball State career for sure.
There you go. So, Willie, this has been awesome. I know we did a Ball State draft a few months ago back. So if anyone out there hasn't seen that yet, go check it out. You were actually Colin's number one overall pick. We had a couple different categories that you had to pick people from, and you were Colin's number in the category for Ball State football players. You were Colin's number one overall pick. So
I appreciate that, gang.
So Colin was texting me earlier today how nervous he was. So it was great. So,
that wasn't that bad though, right, Colin? It's not too bad.
No, it was an honor. It was an honor.
Yeah. So
whenever you guys want to do stuff like this, man, like, I ain't got nothing but time. I'm all day with my kids. I'm a full-time dad when I'm not playing football. So if any of y'all if ever you guys want to do picks, like a little segment like this or whatever, just know I'm always available.
Oh,
So
dang, twist our arm. We'll have you back on again.
for sure, bro. For sure. I appreciate the opportunity, man. It was awesome talking to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Willie. We appreciate it. Everyone out there, be sure. Look, we got Coach Mike Urinovich. We got Willie Snead. We got a couple other big people down the pipe coming up here in the last couple weeks. So
There you
everyone,
go.
be sure to like and subscribe to the video, subscribe to the channel, and chirp chirp. And we'll all see you guys later.
Chirp, chirp.